Hello everyone and welcome to another special Claymation demo. I'm Tommy Sims.
And I'm Jamie Hazelwood.
And today, to follow up our timing for animation demo, we're going to show you the squash and stretch technique.
Squash and stretch? What's that, Tommy?
Well, Jamie, squash and stretch is exactly what it sounds like. We're going to squash our clay and then stretch it out and then squash it and stretch it and squash it and stretch it. And this technique will really demonstrate the physical qualities of Sculpey 3 clay. It also touches upon the steps of a movement, which is the anticipation of it, the action, and then the reaction. And once animated, you'll see that the squash and stretch technique gives your movements a more bouncy, cartoony, overacting type of quality.
And the overacting is kind of what we're striving for, so that way you can really push home what exactly you're trying to portray to your audience. So that's why this squash and stretch right here. We got a little squash, got some stretch. Squash, stretch.
Now, as Jamie was saying here, these are the basic movements that you'll be sculpting. You can sculpt each one individually, but what we're going to do today is take a piece of clay and then we'll take it and then squash it and make that shape and then stretch it out to make this other shape here. And then we'll just be animating this one piece of clay to make it more fluid. But what you could do is sculpt each one of these and then swap them out and then animate it. And I can actually show you that really quick since we have this set up here. So I'm going to take my digital camera again. And it's a little hard for you to see. Let me fix the angle here for you.
There we go.
That's a better shot. So what we're going to do is take them all away, except for this ball here. I'm going to take a few pictures of it to start off with. I'm actually going to zoom in so you can see it a little bit better. Alright, take my first couple images to have an establishing shot again.
And the key with squash and stretch kind of goes back to what you're saying with overacting, because what you're really trying to push is the weight of an object. Obviously, the heavier it is, it's more it's going to squash down, because then the force of gravity squashes it down.
Exactly, and instead of starting with a ball sitting in position, what you could think of is having the ball drop in from the top of the frame, and then that way it would really squash it.
Right, that'd be more of the anticipation, and then the action would be how it's squashing, and then the reaction would be when it squishes back up.
So we squashed it. Then we'll swap that out with the stretch. And I'll take this one and place it touching the tip of the other one and take this one out. This will make it look like it's bouncing across. And we'll take that and swap it out with the squash. And then we'll finish with the ball back in its position.
This kind of goes back to, with the timing demo, it was how fast or how slow you want your character to move, which is what we were working on. Whereas squash and stretch, it's how heavy or how light you want your object to look. Because if it's going to look pretty light, then obviously there wouldn't be much squashing and stretching. But the heavier it is, the more gravity will pull against it and really squish it.
Exactly, and with what we're doing here is basically what we do with two-dimensional animation, is you would draw each shape individually like we have sculpted here, and this is what it looks like. Squash, stretch, bounce back. Now, to make it more fluid looking, we're going to take the one piece of clay here. Get those guys out of the way. Set my camera up. That looks about good. I'm going to roll this guy into a ball.
Almost made cool little shadow puppets.
Yeah. Alright, so we're going to set this guy in his first position. Let's have him over here. What you could do with the squash and stretch is you can bounce your little ball across the entire screen. Now what you want to keep in mind, though, while animating is what's really important is what you see in your camera frame and not really what's elsewhere on here. So if I had the ball over here, as you can see, it's not in the camera frame at all, but I still see it sitting over here on the set. So we want to have it in the frame itself and make sure that it's in the frame. If it's off the frame, you want to bring it into the frame somehow. You could roll it in frame by frame, and you can watch the timing demonstration to see how you can do that. Or you could just have the ball here to start off with, like I'm going to do, and just make sure it's right there. And we'll take the first couple images.
This is what you're talking about with an establishing shot, right, Tommy?
Exactly. We always want to have this so you know where your animation is going to begin. And if you don't use all the pictures that you take here, it's a good placeholder when you're looking through your camera to see where this new animation begins. Because if I review this, you'll see that I have the images here, and if I go back, we're back to the previous red bouncing ball. And if I'm just flipping through really fast, I can see when this one starts. It's like I see the yellow ball because it's frozen there. It's like, oh, I can get ready to watch the next animation here. So I'll take a few more images. This time I didn't zoom because it's a bigger object that we're animating, and it's actually best that you don't zoom because, as you saw with my previous animation with the red ball, I reviewed the image to see that if I placed the clay in the exact spot. And when I came back to the live view of the camera, the zoom zoomed out on me, so I had to zoom back in. So to not worry about that, we're just going to not zoom in at all. So now that I've taken a few images of the ball sitting here, we're going to begin to squash it. Now this is the anticipation of the movement itself. We'll squash it even more.
It's almost like you're kneading a pizza.
Exactly. Squash it even more.
And then you can also combine some of the techniques we just said with the timing as well, where you can take a little bit more shots to make it really squish, or if you want to make it more of a faster movement, then obviously you're going to squish it a little bit more extremely between shots.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here now. So I'm going to take a few more shots to let it look like the ball squished and it's building up energy before it bounces back up. So I'm not going to move it at all for the next 3 or 4 shots here. And it'll make it look like a much slower movement, and then it's going to shoot up here. Now, as you see, there are a lot more different shapes that we're sculpting here compared to the red bouncing ball that had just the key 6 shapes. What I'm doing here is a bunch of in-between shapes that lead you from one key shape to another. And as you can see, we're just stretching the clay out more and more here.
And with this, and with a lot of your filming that you guys will do, whether it be any of your demos or your characters, it's always better to have more pictures than you need, because it's a lot easier to just delete pictures rather than trying to set up your exact shot that you had. So if you think there might be a little bit too much on one particular spot, it's easy to just quick delete a picture rather than trying to recreate exactly what your shot was.
Exactly. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to bounce it back to the other side. And what I did before was I took the 2 red ones and then lined them up together so I knew exactly how to line it up and where it's going to end up landing. But with this guy here, what I'm going to do is kind of make sure that I don't move the tip of him too much. Pick him up. Your clay might be a little bit stuck to your table, but that's okay. And I'm just going to turn him around here, and it'll look like he jumped from this side to this side. And then I'm going to begin to squash him again. Now that stretch was the action of the movement sequence. We're still squashing. And this squash following that stretch is the reaction to that action. But you could also think of the squash as an action itself, because what you can do now is bounce it up into another stretch or bounce it into its into its actual shape of the ball. I'm going to do one more stretch and then I can show you how to bounce it back into the ball. So it's squashed, and now this time the reaction to that squash is the stretch. Turn it around. Squash it. Squash it some more. And some more. A little bit more.
And remember, since you're going to be using your hands an awful lot with the clay to make a lot of these squishing noise, it's always good to have some paper towel ready to always wash your hands, because it'll probably get awfully messy when you're done.
Exactly. You do not want to get this clay all over your house. Certain colors will be picked up on your hands more than other colors. The red clay gets on your hands very, very easily compared to the yellow clay, which I'm using now. And then I'm going to start popping it back up into its ball shape.
Then we can even have it exit the frame, doing a little slower or faster movement. And kind of like how you guys learned in the previous one, where we can put little dash marks, whereas you don't necessarily need to do the dash marks. So this one we can just kind of think in our head as to how fast or how slow we're going to use it, or we're going to move them across.
Right. As you saw, I had to pick up the clay to kind of get it back into its ball shape. I'm just really making sure that it's in the same spot as to where it was the last time I took a picture. That looked about right.
No, I'd say so.
So I'm going to take a few shots of it in the ball form, and then we can begin to roll it off the frame. And like Jamie was saying about our timing exercise, I'm picturing the lines in my head where I want the ball to roll onto.
And the cool thing is with our little demos and exercises with these little ones here is you guys don't have to be too intimidated by making a whole giant character that stands up or make a giant set that looks super believable right away. Because this is kind of more to get your guys' minds ready to just kind of wrap around the concepts of claymation with something simple as just like a little table surface and a little ball of clay.
Right, and all of these techniques you will be coming back to during your bigger, larger claymations. These are basically the basic for any type of animation you want to keep in mind.
Exactly. This is just the film school. Then once we graduate to actually the big budget Hollywood films for our actual class. Right, Tommy?
Right, Jamie.
Exactly. But even then, you don't necessarily have to be limited to this. Like, we can pretend that's just a little mustard stain, and that was a little ketchup one before. So it's just a way to kind of get your guys' minds kind of rocking and rolling, so that way we can get ready to make some awesome films together.
Yep. So now the ball is completely out of the frame, and I took a few more finishing shots just so I know when the animation ends. And I can hit the review button on the camera here. And I can go backwards. And we can see our ball coming backwards, rolling in. And it's going to squash and stretch, and squash and stretch, and go back in the ball form. And that's our first image. Because as you see, there's the red ball again. So we can watch this as many times as we want.
Nice. You can really get that sense of movement by how much he squishes.
Yep.
Sound effects optional. Though encouraged.
Yep. Anything to make it more cartoony.
Exactly. Or just more fun in general.
Yep.
Nice.
So there you have it. Now taking what we learned in our timing animation demo and now our squash and stretch, you're more prepared to take on a much more challenging claymation. So until then, stay animated.
Bye, guys.